Every empire convinces itself it has reinvented money, and every empire eventually discovers it hasn't. Because money operates under rules, ancient, unforgiving laws that ignore politics, promises, and belief. These laws aren't written into constitutions or taught in classrooms. They are uncovered, forgotten, and rediscovered during centuries of financial stress. If you don't understand them, you'll always feel that the system is tilted against you. Tonight, we expose the hidden laws of money from debased Roman coins to the digital machinery of modern central banks. And by the end, you'll see why the game was never built to be fair itself. Let's begin with the first and most unforgiving principle: Gresham's Law. In the 1500s, Sir Thomas Gresham explained it to Queen Elizabeth I. Bad money drives out good. The rule is simple. When two currencies circulate simultaneously, one trusted, one diluted, people spend the inferior currency and hoard the superior. Consider ancient Rome. As the silver denarius was gradually mixed with base metals, citizens were not naive. They paid taxes and debts with the debased coins and preserved the purer silver for themselves. The same pattern appeared throughout medieval Europe, when monarchs clipped coins or replaced gold with cheaper metals. The lesson is clear. When rulers attempt to cheat money, society adapts. People circulate the debased and hide the genuine. Once this cycle starts, trust in money erodes. Next comes a law that acts as the dark mirror of Gresham's law: Thiers law. Named after French statesman Adolphe Thiers in the 19th century, it demonstrates that in times of catastrophic collapse, the logic reverses. Good money expels bad. Take Weimar Germany in the 1920s as an example. Prices doubled almost daily, and wheelbarrows of banknotes were needed to buy bread. Citizens refused to hold marks any longer than necessary, fleeing $2, gold, cigarettes, or barter, anything retaining real value. Similar patterns unfolded in Zimbabwe, Venezuela, and other episodes of hyperinflation. Thiers law captures the instant when a financial system fails and people abandon the state as promises. While Gresham's law shows money's slow decay, Thiers law illustrates sudden death. But what occurs between these extremes, between slow erosion and complete collapse? Enter the Cantillon effect, a principle that reveals why inflation feels inherently unfair. Richard Cantillon, an Irish-French economist in the early 18th century, observed that when new money enters circulation, it does not impact all parties equally. Those closest to the source, governments, banks, and elites, benefit first. By the time the funds trickle down to workers and ordinary savers, prices have already risen. Early recipients purchase assets and goods at yesterday's value, while late recipients pay inflated costs. The Cantillon effect explains why monetary expansion often enriches financial elites, while punishing the general public. It clarifies why quantitative easing after the 2008 crises lifted stock markets but left wages stagnant, and why stimulus payments were absorbed by rising groceries, rents, and housing costs. Inflation, in other words, is not merely a statistic. It is a systematic redistribution of wealth, designed to favor those positioned at the top. The system's cruelty is intentional. Gains are funneled upward while the costs disguised as higher prices fall on ordinary citizens. Most people sense they are losing, but they cannot identify the cause. This effect has operated since the first coins were minted. The wealthy do not just earn more, they literally access money differently. If the Cantillon effect exposes why new money flows uphill, financial repression demonstrates how governments ensure that ordinary citizens can never escape its grasp. Coined after World War II, the term describes methods nations used to manage crushing post-war debts without overtly taxing or governments trapped citizens within a controlled system, quietly eroding wealth. The mechanics were straightforward. Central banks maintained interest rates below inflation, ensuring savings accounts lost value in real terms annually. Simultaneously, capital controls limited options for moving wealth abroad or purchasing alternative assets. Citizens were confined, earning negative returns while governments inflated away their obligations. This quiet form of taxation left no visible mark but inflicted long-term financial damage. Move forward to the 21st century, And the same playbook persists. Following the 2008 financial crisis, interest rates fell near zero for over a decade. Savers saw trillions of real wealth vanish, while those holding stocks and real estate witnessed record gains. Between 2020 and 2021, rates collapsed again, and ordinary citizens watched savings deteriorate as essential costs soared. This was no accident. It was financial repression adapted for contemporary markets. From the perspective of those controlling policy, most citizens never noticed the drain. They simply felt poorer without understanding why. However, these principles are not confined to individual experience. They operate on the scale of nations and empires. This brings us to Triffin's paradox. The reserve currency dilemma. In the 1960s, economist Robert Triffin warned the U.S. Congress about a flaw in the Bretton Woods system. If the dollar served as the world's reserve currency, America had to provide enough dollars to facilitate global trade. This required persistent trade deficits, sending more currency abroad than it earned to supply liquidity to other nations. Initially, this functioned. Global trust in the dollar enabled commerce to flourish, yet in the long run, it created instability. The more dollars exported, the weaker the link to gold, and the more precarious global confidence became. Triffin's prediction materialized in 1971 when President Richard Nixon ended the gold standard, converting the dollar into fiat money. Since then, America has maintained chronic trade deficits, exporting dollars in exchange for foreign goods. Factories disappeared, debt surged, yet dollar dominance continued to sustain the system. The paradox is stark. Maintaining global reserve status requires the U.S. to sacrifice its domestic economic health. It is a law of money that guarantees decay. Consequences are visible everywhere. America consumes more than it produces, financed by endless borrowing. Wall Street prospers, Main Street suffers, and the cycle continues. Meanwhile, global challengers, China, Russia, and the BRICS bloc, develop alternatives. Central banks stockpile gold at rates unseen in decades. The system that once granted unmatched power now contains the seeds of its own decline. If Triffin's paradox shows how the global system is ensnared, then Goodhart's law explains why every attempt to control it worsens the outcome. In the 1970s, economist Charles Goodhart observed a simple but devastating truth. When a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a reliable measure. Governments and central banks love numbers. Inflation at 2%, unemployment at 5%, GDP growth at 3%. These metrics are intended to reflect reality, but once politicians fixate on hitting them at all costs, the system itself becomes distorted. Targets drive policy, and policy drives distortion. Consider inflation targeting. For decades, central banks pledged to maintain inflation near 2%. Reasonable on paper. Yet to achieve this, they manipulated interest rates, flooded markets with liquidity, and inadvertently fueled asset bubbles. Officially, inflation remained stable, but housing, healthcare, and education surged far faster. Reality and statistics diverged dramatically. Or take GDP. Politicians revere it as a gauge of national success. Once growth itself became the goal, governments borrowed heavily, outsourced industries, and inflated financial bubbles just to keep the numbers climbing. The result? An illusion of prosperity laid atop a fragile economic foundation. Goodhart's law uncovers the trap. Managing numbers often blinds us to the truth. Finally, we arrive at the law of diminishing returns on debt. Unlike the elegant symmetry of Gresham or Cantillon, it is brutal arithmetic, the cold math of modern economies. In the early stages of development, debt can stimulate expansion. Borrow $1, generate $1 or more of GDP growth. But as debt accumulates, returns shrink. One new dollar of borrowing may yield 50 cents of growth, then 25, then even less. Eventually, the machine grinds under the weight of its obligations. Growth stagnates even as debt climbs. We are now living in that stage. U.S. debt exceeds $30 trillion. Each borrowing surge produces progressively less real wealth. Instead, it props up financial markets, funds, entitlements, and maintains the illusion of economic momentum. Historical patterns echo this logic. Ancient Rome debased coins when expansion slowed. The French monarchy borrowed itself toward collapse before 1789. Britain's empire strained under debts after 2 world wars. Today, America faces the same reckoning. Debt does not vanish. It accumulates, demanding ever larger payments. Borrowing buys time, not freedom. The law is indifferent to ambition or policy. It functions like gravity, relentless and unavoidable. Nations, like individuals, cannot escape its pull. Ignoring the rules does not negate them. The arithmetic of debt does not lie, and the outcome is predictable. Taken together, these laws illustrate a coherent pattern. Gresham demonstrates the slow decay of currency. Thiers exposes rapid collapse. The Cantillon effect reveals how new money favors the few before the many. Financial repression traps citizens in cycles of wealth erosion. Triffin's paradox shows the inherent instability of global reserve currencies. Goodhart illustrates the distortion that arises from manipulating targets, and the law of diminishing returns on debt reveals the ultimate limits of borrowing. Each principle reflects a distinct aspect of monetary reality, yet they converge to a single conclusion. Financial systems are bound by rules that cannot be ignored. These are not abstract academic concepts. They manifest in the daily experiences of ordinary people. Inflation erodes savings. Wage growth lags behind asset price increases. Mortgages become heavier, even as stock markets soar. Nations rise on trust and crumble under debt. Each crisis, each boom and bust, follows these immutable patterns. And just as importantly, the system was never designed for egalitarian outcomes. Ordinary citizens live under scrutiny. Elites live in opacity. You earn wages. They access money first. You hold cash that loses value. They hold assets that appreciate. Understanding these laws is not optional. It is essential for navigating the financial world. History does not repeat, but money obeys principles that persist through time. Ignorance does not shield one from their effects. Every empire, every financial innovation, every monetary experiment has unfolded under the same constraints. The same rules that governed Roman coins, medieval gold, and the Weimar mark apply to modern digital currencies, central bank interventions, and global reserve systems. To recognize these forces is to gain perspective. To act without understanding them is to participate blindly in a game designed by forces beyond individual control. These laws form the invisible architecture of wealth and power, guiding outcomes with merciless consistency. So, what do these laws reveal when we step back? That money isn't mystical. It follows rules as unforgiving as gravity. Inferior money drives out superior money until collapse arrives. Crises push people toward sound assets. Newly created money benefits the few before reaching the many. Governments repress citizens to quietly erase debts. Reserve currencies undermine themselves. Targets distort reality, and debt ultimately devours itself. The hidden laws of money are not abstract theories. They are survival guides. They show why inflation diminishes savings, why wages lag behind rising costs, why mortgages feel heavier even as stock markets hit records, why nations prosper on trust and falter under debt. These patterns are not random. They are the pulse of financial history. And here is the harshest truth. The system was never structured for you to win. Ordinary citizens live under scrutiny. Elites live in secrecy. You earn wages. They receive money first. You hold cash that loses value. They hold assets that appreciate. The system obeys its own principles. And if you ignore them, you will always play blind. History may not repeat, but money obeys its laws. And if you fail to understand them, they will crush you all the same. If this perspective reshaped how you see the financial world, hit subscribe. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to find them.